This program contains graphic violence and sexual situations. Viewer discretion is advised. Over a terrifying 5-month period between 1977 and 1978, 10 pretty young women are strangled to death, their naked corpses dumped in California's Hollywood Hills.
We got a call from the coroner saying, hey, we've got another female that's been strangled.
The killing spree begins with 3 prostitutes desperately trying to survive on the harsh streets.
They could get away with it, and it was easy, and it became a game.
But soon, girls from comfortable middle-class neighborhoods are abducted and horrifically murdered.
Tortured them, strangled them, and had sex with them.
Los Angeles residents are gripped in terror. Before the killer is caught, 12 young women meet their fate at the hands of what the media dubs the Hillside Strangler.
What no one knew was that it wasn't just one killer, it was 2.
One is a handsome newcomer to the City of Angels and a smooth-talking scam artist. The other, a degenerate who relishes creative forms of torture.
They were pretending to be police.
Just like 2 police officers identify themselves.
This was a game. They were in it for the thrill killing.
Meet Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Bono, 2 sadistic cousins with an astonishing ability to elude the law, until murder made them famous. In the fall of 1977, the media warned LA that the City of Angels had a demon in its midst.
Near Los Angeles, 11 women have been killed by a man known to the police as the Hillside Strangler.
It was a local story, it was a national story, and it was a fascinating story.
Broadcast coast to coast, the national nightly news reported on the latest victim of the Hillside Strangler, sometimes less than a week apart.
Young women were being found dead, strewn across the Hollywood Hills, and LA was on high alert.
The gruesome killings were front-page headlines.
There was a media frenzy.
My daughter was the same age as those victims, and I was panic-stricken.
Books that delved into the psyche of the killers have been written since.
It was such a crazy murder spree that several Hollywood movies have been made about it.
And the media buzz around the Hillside Stranglers was so intense that it initiated several copycat killings.
When police finally pieced together the clues, the outcome is almost as shocking as the crimes.
The origins of this horrifying story can be traced back to Rochester, New York in 1951. Kenneth Bianchi is born to a 17-year-old prostitute and alcoholic who gives him up for adoption. His relationship with his adoptive mother is reportedly strained, cold, and unaffectionate.
Being the child of a prostitute and being raised by a woman who's an angry, controlling woman, I think all were part of his anger towards women and his anger at having been abandoned by his original mother.
The stresses of his early childhood begin to manifest themselves physically when Kenneth turns 5. He begins going into trance-like states with his eyes rolling back into his head.
He was apparently diagnosed with petit mal syndrome, which is really rare. And the seizures start suddenly, and they're often mistaken for daydreaming. When Ken was going through these episodes, his father was working as a foreman at a foundry. He died when Ken was just 13 years old.
Kenneth shows little outward emotion after his father's funeral service.
He was raised by a very controlling, domineering mother. He was taught in school by authoritarian nuns. He competed in school with girls he felt were very competitive and aggressive. And he constantly struggled with these angry impulses, aggressive impulses towards women.
Upon graduating high school, Ken aspires to become a police officer. But after failing entrance exams, he settles on being a security guard.
That job as a security guard didn't last for very long, because Ken was fired for stealing the very merchandise that he was hired to protect. But Ken wasn't the only member of his family who showed signs of early criminal behavior.
Out west in Glendale, California, Kenneth's older cousin, Angelo Bono Jr., lives with his mother and sister. Angelo had met Ken just once many years before, and like his cousin, he exhibits troubling behavior as a youth. In addition to stealing cars, Angelo is a small-time thief. By the time Angelo turns 14, he routinely boasts to friends about raping and sodomizing women.
Angelo was obsessed with Carol Chessman, an old-time serial rapist. And that was just a sign of things to come.
Angelo, why are you taking him?
As a teenager, Angelo drops out of school and is arrested several times on larceny charges.
Angelo was causing so much trouble at home that they sent him off to reform school. But like the true criminal he was, he quickly escaped.
In 1976, at the age of 25, Kenneth Bianchi relocates to Los Angeles and moves in with his 41-year-old cousin, Angelo.
Yeah. You got all your stuff?
In LA, Angelo runs his own small but successful auto upholstery shop.
Immediately, Ken starts idolizing his cousin, who is 16 years older than him, and in Ken's mind, has a really great way with girls.
What's up, cousin? Here, get in, hold this up.
Not long after Kenneth moves in, the cousins realize they have similar interests in womanizing and criminal ways, and they formulate a sinister business plan.
I think I know a way we can make some extra cash. I'm listening. Girls. Ain't no reason we can't get a couple of girls to work for us.
Now that you mention it, there was this girl I met from Phoenix the other night. She's out here trying to be a model.
Yeah?
Yeah.
See what you can do.
Something tells me we're gonna be good business partners, you and me.
Ken and Angelo are looking for an easy way to make some quick money. So they cross paths with a young runaway named Sabra Hannon, and they talk her into becoming a prostitute. They basically become her pimps.
Sabra is beaten and intimidated into working for the cousins as a prostitute and their own personal sex slave. Sabra Hannon, who's only 16, is joined by another Phoenix runaway, Becky Spears.
Sabra Hannon and Becky were kind of slaves for Bono. Obviously, the intention was to bring them in for prostitution. The girls were emotionally captured, so they were afraid to run away.
Bono and Bianchi somehow hooked up with some of the main bureaucrats of the city, including the chief of police and some other people who were serviced by Sabra. And apparently, Bono and Bianchi made some money and shared a little love with Sabra.
The girls get some help from one of their high-powered Beverly Hills clients, and they finally escape. And that leaves Angelo and Ken desperate to find other prostitutes to work for them. And you gotta have clients. So to get those clients, the cousins bought a list of Johns, which were men who were willing to pay for sex.
The trick list, as it's called, is purchased from a couple of part-time prostitutes whom Ken and Angelo know from the streets. Shortly thereafter, the cousins check to see if they got their money's worth.
The list of Johns turned out to be bogus. The cousins were infuriated and went out to find the girls who sold it to them.
One of the girls is named Yolanda Washington, and she never expected that the con game she was playing could be a deadly one. Across town, Yolanda gets ready for work. At just 19 years old, she's turned to prostitution near Sunset Boulevard to supplement her income as a part-time waitress. When the cousins find Yolanda, they pretend that everything is fine and lure her into the car under the guise of turning a quick trick.
Bianchi was in the back seat with her, and he said that Bono gave him some kind of a sign.
Girls like that deserve to die. Teach her to sell us a no-good list.
Ken brutally killed Yolanda that night. Her life was tragically cut short before she even turned 20 years old.
On October 18th, 1977, the nude body of Yolanda Washington is found dumped on a hillside off of the Ventura Freeway.
Fortunately, it's not something that happens every day, but it's not that uncommon. So that case sort of went under the radar.
They thought a pimp had killed her. You were dealing with people that nobody cared about. They're prostitutes. So prostitutes are often seen as not human.
Yolanda has been strangled to death, and ligature marks are visible on her wrists. She has also been raped.
I think they started out having getting back at this one girl, Yolanda Washington, And then that was kind of fun, and they could get away with it, and it was easy, and it became a game. And then I think that kind of behavior may become almost addicting in its own way.
They had gotten their first taste of blood. And about 2 weeks after killing Yolanda Washington, they were searching for their next victim. And thus, their killing spree began.
Ken and Angelo are just getting started.
This was a game between Bianchi and Bono. They were in it for the thrill killing.
It is the night before Halloween in 1977, and up and down Sunset Boulevard, young people head to parties.
It's also the night that Ken and Angelo pick out their next prey, 15-year-old Judith Lynn Miller. The high school student was a runaway with an alleged drug problem, and she sold herself to feed her habit.
Listen, I gotta get out of here. It's getting late and I need to work.
Okay, I got this.
About midnight, she stood on the curb and trying to attract attention to do a trick as a 15-year-old prostitute.
Hey, what have we here?
Yeah, she'll do.
The cousins devise a ploy to get vulnerable young girls to trust them.
I'll make a right here and drop you off. There, wait at that bus stop right there.
With Ken out of the car, Angelo was a lot less threatening.
I'll be back. I'll be here.
So he headed back to Judy to pose as a potential customer.
Hey, baby.
Hey.
Bianchi and Bono had both obtained real police badges, and they would act just like two police officers, identify themselves.
Step out of the car, ma'am.
Not again.
Come on out.
In the Miller case, they made what would have been like a vice stop or a vice arrest. They took her in based on the fact that she was on the street.
Bianchi was a private security guard years ago, and they were pretending to be police. They started out hassling the prostitutes in Hollywood with that premise.
Judy still has no idea she's being kidnapped by killers.
We going to the Hollywood division?
Nope. Going to a special unit.
I ain't done nothing.
You've got to remember, this was a 15-year-old girl. She didn't have much life experience, so you can only assume that she was very confused and very, very scared.
Where are we?
It's that satellite station I was telling you about. Take a seat.
They'd take the girl into the house. They'd set him in one of those big easy chairs.
I got an idea. Get behind her.
What are you doing?
Shut up!
What are you doing?
Quit squirming.
He tied her up around the neck, tied both of her wrists and her ankles, and sodomized her.
Who wants to go first?
These two soulless predators took turns having their way with this poor little girl.
And when they are done, they put a plastic bag over her head, a cord around her neck, and strangle her to death. After sadistically murdering 15-year-old Judy Miller, the cousins discard her nude body in the hills near Glendale.
Judy's pale, lifeless body was discovered the next morning by a resident. It was another senseless murder by these savage cousins.
They left absolutely no identification, no jewelry, no nothing on the bodies that were left on the hillside.
Bizarre. No fingerprints. Nothing. Just those ligature marks around her neck, wrists, and ankles.
When my partner and I responded to the crime scene on Judy Miller, there was some information that it might have been a drug overdose, but when we pulled up, parked, got out of the car, it was obvious we had a murder because we saw the ligature marks, the marks on her wrist and neck and on her ankles.
The only physical evidence police find is a tiny fiber of fabric on Judy's eyelid. But DNA testing didn't exist in the late 70s, so they save it into evidence and leave baffled.
See, if we had the DNA, the genetics that we had today, we could have said whose it was, but we couldn't in that day.
At this point, detectives don't have much to go on. Just 2 corpses and no indication that they're even connected.
Judy Miller, she was unidentified for 10 days. So she was still at the coroner's office when we got a call from the coroner saying, hey, we've got another female in here that's been strangled.
The bodies are starting to pile up. And the latest belongs to 21-year-old Lisa Caston, a waitress and part-time prostitute.
See these ligature marks?
It was obvious whoever killed our girl had killed Lisa Caston and vice versa. They had the exact same ligature marks on the neck, the ankles, and on the wrists. The ligature marks that we looked at were marks made either by a rope or a plastic tie, something like that. And there was no doubt then that we at least had a killer out there that had killed 2 young ladies within a short span of time.
The killers have developed a signature, and it's not long before they apply it to their next 2 victims.
A 9-year-old boy found 2 innocent girls in a pile of trash near Dodgers Stadium. At first, he thinks that their bodies are mannequins.
Dolores Cepeda is just 12 years old, and her best friend, Sonia Johnson, 14. They are abducted after getting off a school bus.
They tortured them, strangled them, and had sex with them, and then threw them in the dump at the Legion Park. That, by the way, is only about 3 miles from Bono's upholstery shop.
The cousins have sunk to a new low. They've gone from killing prostitutes to killing schoolgirls.
Ken and Angelo are just getting started, and they're about to expand their hunting grounds even further. Christina Weckler, a quiet, intellectual 20-year-old honors student at the Pasadena Art Center College of Design, is finishing up class.
Okay, everyone, that's it for today. Don't forget midterms next week, and you know what's expected.
Are you ready?
Almost ready.
You coming to Z's soiree? It's a Saturday night.
No. You know I don't smoke that stuff. Plus, I'm trying to study out.
She seemed to be a very wholesome, sweet person. Had a good family. Obviously, somebody didn't have any enemies.
Christina was creatively gifted and had a bright future ahead of her, until one fatal visit from Kenneth Bianchi.
She fell victim to this because of an unlucky day. She knew Bianchi prior because he lived in the same general facility that she lived in.
Hey there, remember me? Kenneth Bianchi. I used to live like 2 doors down from you, in the same complex. Oh, well, okay, anyway, I'm a part of the police reserves now here in Hollywood, and actually, I mean, badge and everything. But I was out patrolling the old neighborhood, and I was wondering, do you still drive that VW down there?
Yeah.
Okay, well, don't get too upset, but it looks like someone crashed into it. Yeah, it's not super bad, but if you wanted to come down with me, we could fill out some paperwork and make it a lot easier to get some insurance on it.
Maybe Christina realized something wasn't right. And if she did, she went against her intuition.
Yeah? Just real quick. It won't take too long. It's right down this way.
And once she was outside, the cousins forced her into their car.
They abducted her, took her back to Bono's upholstery shop, where most of the victims wound up.
Okay, now what?
I got another idea. Stay here. Don't worry about it.
Bored with simply strangling them to death, the 2 decide to experiment with various forms of torture.
Let's see what this does. I like new toys.
Get your arm over here.
They inject her with window cleaner in the arm and in the neck.
There we go.
The torture thing was sickening to put those girls through that. I can't imagine what it'd have been like to be sitting in that damn chair in Bono's house.
They finally drag her nearly lifeless body into the kitchen and place it next to a gas pipe. Put a bag over her head, stuff the pipe in the bag, and turn the gas on.
There are two animals in charge. They can do whatever they want to do and get away with it. That's how they looked at it.
Finally, they strangle her with a cord.
That ought to do it.
As simple as that, Christina Weckler lost her life. It's sad. It's tragic. I mean, I'm talking 40 years ago, and I still have emotions about that.
On November 20th, 1977, two hikers stumble upon Christina's body in the hills near Glendale and immediately report it to police.
Christina Weckler was the case that I was assigned as a primary investigator. And I noted that she had distinctive markings on the body.
The autopsy will reveal that these came from where the cousins injected her with window cleaner. But there are other markings that stand out too.
She did have what we referred to as 5-point ligature marks that were distinctive. We had the ligature mark around the neck. We had the ligature marks on the wrist, which indicates they probably were tied, and the ligature marks on the ankles.
Detectives still have no idea who's responsible for these horrific crimes.
The police had dead girls on their hands, but had no idea that the crimes were related, let alone that there were two perpetrators and that they were related.
By now, the police know of 6 young women that have been horrifically murdered in the LA area. However, detectives Frank Salerno and Bob Grogan have a hunch there are 2 killers working together.
We felt that this was a 2-man operation. We contributed that to the bodies being carried to point A to point B. It would have taken 2 to do it.
Subsequent to that, we received some information in regards to 2 people trying to make police stops.
Detectives now know that there are 2 men pretending to be police officers. But so far, that's about it.
Very difficult investigation to do. We had nothing.
As investigators struggle with the case, Ken Bianchi goes about his life. At this point, Ken is no longer living with Angelo, but has moved in with his now pregnant girlfriend, Kelly Boyd.
So get this. Ken and Angelo are kidnapping, torturing, raping, and killing young women. And then Ken is going home to his pregnant girlfriend who's carrying his child. He was living a twisted double life.
Has the baby been kicking?
A little. Good night.
Night-night.
Kelly has no idea what Ken is up to when he is out late. And the soon-to-be father isn't about to stop his sadistic behavior.
$800? This rusty old hoop ain't even worth 80 cents. We gave you what was required. Now hand over the keys, you Luddite.
Not bad at all. Still needs a little work, but definitely getting there.
Jane King is a beautiful 28-year-old aspiring actress who is attending an acting class at the Church of Scientology.
Need a ride? Oh, no thanks. I'm gonna take the bus. Okay, bye.
Anyone who's driven in Los Angeles knows that traffic can be a real challenge. Jane usually tried to avoid that by taking the bus home after class.
Bono and Bianchi were cruising around. Franklin is just off of Hollywood Boulevard and Sunset Boulevard, where they had picked up a lot of the original prostitutes.
I
I feel like some fresh young thing. Blonde.
Like a UCLA cheerleader type? Okay. Maybe we could go to Malibu, Riverside.
Nah, too far.
Well, what do we have here?
Yeah, choice goods.
Real choice.
The cousins spot the vulnerable young Jane and devise a devious ruse.
I'll go sit next to her, strike up a conversation. You circle the blocks a few times, act surprised to see me when you pull up. Got it?
Yep.
Right.
So Kenny got out of the car, give his line of.
Hey there. Do you happen to have any idea when the next bus is coming?
I think we just missed one, so maybe 20, 30 minutes.
You work around here?
No, I just got off rehearsal for an upcoming play.
Oh, nice, very nice. Hey, Angelo!
Ken, what are you doing here?
Car's in the shop.
Oh, man, well, I can give you a ride if you want.
Nah, don't worry about it. I don't want to be a bother.
Come on, I go right by her street. If it's not too far, I can drop her too. I don't mind.
No, thanks. I'll just wait.
Listen, we're both a part of the police reserves here in LA. I'd much rather you come with us than sit out here in Hollywood at night.
Okay, well, if it's really not a bother.
No, it's not a problem at all. Come on, come with me. It's cool.
Jane willingly goes with them, not knowing that they are heading back to Angelo's to what has now become their own personal torture chamber.
There we go. All right, drive.
They took her to Bono's upholstery shop where she was raped, and they eventually strangled her and killed her.
Almost 2 weeks pass before Jane's remains are discovered by a construction worker.
She had been discarded into the off-ramp and into the ivy, into the bushes there. And a work crew came along and discovered her.
Detectives are desperate for new clues that will lead them to the killer. But all they're seeing are the same ligature marks on the neck, wrists, and ankles of the victims.
With 7 murders over the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving and nude corpses publicly displayed, newspapers begin giving front-page coverage to the crimes, and the national news provides nightly updates. The press ascribes the now infamous Hillside Strangler moniker.
Well, it was a name that really was designed almost to strike terror into the citizens of Los Angeles County.
There was a lot of fear in the air. People weren't safe, didn't feel safe at night.
My daughter was the same age as those victims, and I was panic-stricken. Of course, with the help of the newspapers, I mean, it was headlines, Los Angeles Times beat it to death. There were women buying guns, there were women taking all kinds of self-defense lessons to protect themselves, because there was a real panic in the city.
Jane King was a case that came up during what we call the week that was. That's when things really started to break loose as far as the newspapers went. And the task force grew and grew and grew.
In all our victims' cases, we have the same ligature marks on every single victim, around the ankles, the wrist, and the neck. These victims still keep stacking up on us, and we have no information to go on. As you can see, this is being more pressing and urgent day after day.
The task force had grown to 100 people. We had to have that many people because of the clues that came in, over 11,000 of them. And those people all had to be followed up and interviewed.
As a matter of fact, one of our investigators described themselves as clue clowns. They were just chasing clues, and so they were clue clowns.
The task force questions numerous suspects, including Kenneth Bianchi.
We had some incidents where Bianchi's name was tossed about by people who worked with him in the title company.
Kenneth Bianchi was called in 5 or 6 times, and eventually he was cleared because the investigator doing the follow-up didn't have all of the knowledge that he should have had and just let him slip through.
By now, Ken and Angelo probably thought that they were invincible, that they could get any girl they wanted, even in broad daylight.
A few days past Thanksgiving, 18-year-old Lauren Wagner is heading home from the community college where she's been taking business classes.
Lauren Wagner lived with her family out in the suburban part of San Fernando Valley. She graduated high school and was attending community college.
They had seen her and they were following her. And they stopped her a house or two from her residence.
Hey! Police! Pull over to the curb! Right now!
They pretended to be police officers.
You're under arrest. Come on, come with me. Come on, come with me.
I didn't do
Come with me.
anything.
You're under arrest. You're under arrest.
I just live
Don't worry
right
about
there.
it. Don't worry about it.
Please,
Come on.
just let me talk to my
Come on.
dad. I didn't do
Get in the car.
anything.
Get in the car. Drive it. Go drive.
I didn't do anything.
The witness lived in the house right where the car was parked. And she was the first witness who said she saw two guys. That confirmed our belief we had two suspects. Also, the car was Bianchi's Cadillac, which could look like a police car because it was blue and white.
Once inside the Cadillac, Lauren knows that she is in the hands of the Hillside Stranglers.
She reportedly didn't resist. Maybe she thought that that would spare her life, but on the contrary, after they raped her, the cousins amped up their method of torture.
Time for something new. Put your hands together. Put your hands together. Come on.
With Wagner, they tried a little electricity.
I think Bono liked to torture people, liked to have sadistic type sex. I think Bianchi's main thrill was in killing people, taking their life, seeing them die.
Hillside Strangler victim number 8, Lauren Ray Wagner, is found dead on a hill the next day.
Again, here we are, the all-American young girl, just driving home, and Bono and Bianchi pulled her over for an alleged traffic stop.
And I always wondered if she'd have pulled into her driveway, what would have happened?
Investigators continue to be at a loss. It seems that with every crime, the killers become bolder, so much so that they're about to outsource their search for victims. 17-year-old prostitute Kimberly Martin works for the Climax Outcall Service, an agency that sets up meetings between customers and prostitutes. Unknowingly, they set up a rendezvous with Ken and Angelo.
They sent her to an empty room at the Tamarind complex apartment that Bianchi and Bono accessed. She knew it right away. She knew it right away. This was a mistake.
Ken and Angelo kill Kimberly and dump her body like the others in the Hollywood Hills.
That was a spread eagle job overlooking a city home. There was a message there, maybe.
The fear probably peaked after Kimberly Martin. It really exposed how powerless and how little the police knew. That's what scared people.
We'll always accept a lucky break and be very appreciative of it. Lucky breaks help you crack them sooner. We'll keep at it until it is cracked.
Fear of these sadistic killers grips Los Angeles, and one unfortunate young local is about to walk straight into Ken and Angelo's trap.
20-year-old student Cindy Hudspeth worked part-time at the local coffee shop, but her real passion was dancing. So sometimes after her shift, she would give lessons.
Thanks, Cindy.
You're welcome.
You doing your disco dance lessons tonight?
No lessons tonight. I've got one stop, then I'm headed home.
The one stop that Cindy had to make was at Angelo's trim shop, of all places. She actually had legitimate car work that needed to be done.
Afternoon. Can I help you?
Yeah, you do carpets for cars and stuff here, right?
Why, yes, I do.
Good. I'd like to talk to you about getting some floor mats made for my Datsun here.
The name's Angelo. Just call me Tony.
Or call him Buzzard. That's what everyone else does. That's his nickname. Nice to meet you. My name's Ken.
I'm about to close up shop, but can show you some different carpet swatches. Got them in here.
Cindy has no idea she's walked right into the hands of two of the most sadistic killers in Los Angeles history.
And they took care of her after that.
Where else have you lived around here? Here.
They strangled her to death. And now, not only did they have to take care of her body, but they had to figure out what to do with her car, which was parked out front.
They place Cindy's body in the trunk of her car, drive to the top of a cliff, and push the car over the edge.
Cindy Hudspeth was the last victim in Los Angeles. She was found the next day in the trunk of her car.
In February 1978, the murders suddenly stop, and the trail goes cold. With the thrill of the kill starting to fade, paranoia sets in, and the cousins grow increasingly hostile toward each other.
Because they were getting away with murder, Ken Bianchi was getting more and more arrogant. And Angelo thought it was just a matter of time before Ken's big mouth gave them away.
At one point, it becomes so tense between the cousins that they almost kill each other.
Bianchi went to Highland Park Police Station. He told the sergeant there, he said, "Hey, I'm thinking of becoming a policeman. I'd like to go on a ride-along." Well, the sergeant took him out. And then during the ride-along, Bianchi says to the sergeant, "Do you know where the locations are where the Hillside Strangler girls were dumped?"
Ken Bianchi goes back to Angelo Bono and tells him that he went on the ride-along with police.
Well, that blew it for Bono. According to Bianchi, Bono took his gun out and threatened to kill him. And he said, "You're out of my life." So he threw him out.
Now that the bitter cousins are at odds, Ken follows his girlfriend, Kelly, and their newborn son to Bellingham, Washington.
Ken was a new dad living in Bellingham, Washington with his girlfriend, Kelly. And he was putting on this air of respectability. But old habits die hard, and the con man decided it was time for a new career.
Ken rents a small office space, forges a few psychology degrees, and opens a counseling service. Little do his patients know they are telling their most intimate secrets to a cold-blooded killer.
Ken was getting tired of the good guy routine. He was addicted to the adrenaline that he had when he was killing and torturing women.
Since Ken had gotten away with the Hillside murders in tandem with Angelo, he's certain he's smart enough to pull it off as a solo act in Bellingham.
So Ken closed his counseling practice and started a new job that would be a perfect cover for his hellish plans.
He got a job as a security guard, and he became acquainted with some college girls.
I'd like you to meet my friend, Diane.
Nice to meet you too. Well, thanks for meeting me here, guys.
Ken has lied to them, telling them that the security company wants them to watch the house for them. Once inside, Ken puts his plan into action.
Ken is in the basement, acting as if the lights don't work. When Karen Mandich comes down to help, he strangles her.
Kenneth now has to deal with Karen's friend, Diane Wilder.
Mandich took her girlfriend along with her, but Mandich also told other people that Bianchi had offered her this job.
The next morning, their lifeless bodies are found stuffed into Karen's car, which has been abandoned at the end of a cul-de-sac. Police pieced together what had happened. Karen had told her boyfriend about the house-sitting job, and when they searched her apartment, they found a note with Ken's name on it. Police traced the note back to Ken's house.
What is going on here? Hold, what is going on? Sir?
Placing you under arrest.
Police suspect they've apprehended someone with a long, horrific past.
We got a call from Bellingham, Washington. They wanted an inquiry as to an individual named Kenneth Bianchi. We ran his DMV. He came back with addresses that connect him to Cindy Hudspeth and Christina Weckler. And I flew to Bellingham the next day.
We were elated, but we only got one guy. And now the work begins.
There were so many similarities between the killings in Washington and the Hillside Stranglings from 2 years earlier. So now all police had to do was to find Ken's accomplice, Angelo Bono.
The detectives went up to Bellingham to talk to Kelly Boyd, and they asked her the first question, well, we think 2 people did these murders. Who's he hanging out with? She said, well, that's pretty obvious. Angelo Bono, that's the only person.
Back in Los Angeles, detectives get a search warrant to process Angelo's residence for evidence.
Police found carpet fibers from Angelo's place on the bodies. They also found the hair from one of the victims in Ken's house and a pubic hair from Ken on one of the victims.
Meanwhile, Ken is being held in jail where he maintains his innocence despite the evidence mounting against him. To bring Angelo to justice, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office offers Ken a deal. If he pleads guilty to the Bellingham murders and some of the Hillside Stranglings, and also testifies truthfully against Angelo, he will get life with the possibility of parole.
And he had decided to plead guilty up there to 5 of our cases in order to testify against Bono and save him from the death penalty.
Ken's not going down alone and rats out his cousin, Angelo. On October 22, 1979, Angelo is arrested at his Glendale home for his involvement in the Hillside Stranglings. Even with a plea deal, Ken tries to get off the hook.
He used tactics like pretending to have amnesia. And when he was under hypnosis, he showed signs of having multiple personalities.
I was told that there was a possibility that I had what's called a multiple personality, which means that there are 2 separate distinct personalities within the same body, I guess.
I got called by the prosecution after Ken Bianchi had been arrested in Washington. It was my opinion, from reviewing a large amount of data, records, police reports, Kenneth Bianchi's school records, hospital records, medical records, interviewing him over a period of 9 hours, and I reached an opinion that Kenneth Bianchi was not a multiple personality disorder, that he never was under a state of hypnosis.
I ultimately concluded, as a matter of law, Bianchi faked multiple personalities.
I told you, killing abroad doesn't make any difference to me.
Ken is flown down to Los Angeles in the spring of 1982 to stand trial for the Hillside Stranglings, and the media circus ensues.
At the time, it was the most publicized case in Los Angeles criminal history.
The prosecution's case has to be painstakingly corroborated with witness accounts because so little physical evidence has been found.
The witnesses started with Beulah Stouffer, the woman who had watched Lauren Wagner's abduction. Then there was the last known witness to see Judy Miller alive. He had seen her from across the street as she was leaving the diner. And the tuft of fiber that was found on Judy Miller's eyelid from 2 years before.
So we didn't have a lot of physical evidence, but the little bit we did have, we were able to connect to Bono and Bianchi.
And investigators even hear from Catherine Lorre, daughter of famed actor Peter Lorre, that she had been targeted by Bono and Bianchi.
The cousins approached Catherine and flashed a badge at her. But when they realized that she was a famous celebrity's daughter, they let her go.
The trial includes testimony from 392 witnesses, 1,800 exhibits, and a transcript that runs more than 57,000 pages.
The case was in the Guinness Book of Records as the longest criminal trial.
You couldn't avoid it. It was on TV every night. It was in the newspapers every day. And up until that point, it was probably the biggest case in California.
In the fall of 1983, after being on trial for over a year, Angelo Bono is found guilty of 9 murders. Kenneth Bianchi is charged in the murders of the 2 women in Bellingham and 5 murders in Los Angeles. The Hillside Stranglers are sentenced to life behind bars. Angelo Bono ends up at Calipatria State Prison and dies of a heart attack on September 21st, 2002, at age 67.
The fact that Bono died of a heart attack in prison couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Ken Bianchi was sent back to Washington, and he's currently serving a life sentence in Walla Walla State Penitentiary.
Although it's been over 4 decades since the murders, several film adaptations have been made, including The Case of the Hillside Stranglers, starring Dennis Farina and Billy Zane.
Bono was a sexual predator. Bianchi was a sociopath. That was a relationship made in hell.
These murderers became famous because it's so rare to have tag team killers. But the legacy of the girls who they kidnapped, raped, and strangled should never be forgotten.